Hello and welcome to Mentora IAS. I am Safir and I welcome you to this grand current affairs session that we are going to start today with respect to the UPSC Civil Services Examination. Current affairs being a pain point, a Herculean task, an insurmountable task is something that has a lot of dimensions to cover, a lot of breadth and latitude to cover. But the point is what to cover, how to cover. So here at Mentora IAS, we have come to help you out just with that. We are going to come out with a year-long program that is basically going to be of current affairs, and you will be trained on how exactly to approach current affairs by making them understand to you what exactly are current affairs. So आज current affairs में what exactly we are going to do is that we are going to start with the very first aspect of prelims. So the journey would be that there will be sessions dedicated for mains as well. Okay, so one day you would be having sessions for prelims current affairs. The second day you would be having all those issues that require analysis and that may turn out to be a booster for mains. So this particular course is going to be completely free of cost. This is going to be there all throughout the year, no subscription whatsoever. All you need to do is log on to our channel, subscribe and keep liking and commenting. मेरा आप लोगों से जो कहना है वो ये है कि इस पर्टिकुलर सीरीज में एक्टिव रहना. प्लीज बी रियली एक्टिव इन दिस पर्टिकुलर सीरीज. आस्क योर डाउट्स, आस्क एज मेनी डाउट्स एज पॉसिबल, शेयर इट विथ योर फ्रेंड्स बिकॉज वी रियली वांट यू गाइज टू excel out in current affairs and at the same time the civil services examination. Now this particular series will be having partly Hindi, partly English kind of approach. Okay, most of the lecture you are going to have it in English, but yes, simple English that you can understand. थोड़ी बातें मैं हिंदी में भी करूँगा so that you don't feel left out. But at the same time हमको ये बात समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि current affairs को पढ़ने के लिए कोई बहुत बड़ा commitment नहीं करना पड़ता. All the commitment that I am asking you to do is that just glance through your newspaper. Once you glance through your newspaper, we are here to help you out with all your doubts with respect to current affairs. We are going to cover the most important, most probable topics, and there will be no you can say topic which is going to have information overload for you. So things which are broken down to simplest of the concepts and at the same time the best of the you can say information from the best of the teachers. So let us begin this particular session on current affairs. So this particular welcome slide also has got few elements right here. Okay, you can see somewhere it is written vice president, somewhere it is written Vikram, somewhere it is written population, and somewhere it has been written engineers. Okay, so basically what we are going to do today is that we are going to cover these four topics with respect to the preliminary examination. So we will be starting with the first event, that is going to be the election of the vice president of India. Then we will be moving on to India's first microprocessor that has been indigenously built, that has been named Vikram 3201. Then we would be moving on to the census 2027 exercise that has recently been announced. And finally, we will be talking about one of the most distinguished engineers of India on his birthday. So let us begin this particular journey at Vice President of India. So when we talk about the Vice President of India, before we get there, this is exactly what I would want you to answer. So take your time, read this particular question and try answering this, and at the same time comment them in the comment box. So I would want you to take a pause, read this question, okay, and then answer this. And this is basically how we are going to have this particular approach going on. We would be throwing you certain questions first so that you basically have your mind stimulated, and then these are the questions that we are going to cover in our prelims examination coverage as well. तो ये क्वेश्चन को आप देखो, पॉज करो एंड ट्राई आंसरिंग दिस. कमेंट बॉक्स में इसको लिखो कि व्हाट कुड बी द आंसर, और इसको हम अभी सॉल्व करेंगे आफ्टर वी कवर द एंटायर टॉपिक. ओके, सिमिलरली you have got this second paper, this question as well. So this is basically an assertion reasoning type of question. So this question also requires some amount of you can say depth with respect to vice president of India. तो आराम से पढ़ो और जो सही लगता है उस आंसर को टिक करो, ठीक है. सो आई वुड जस्ट adjust this a bit for you so that you have the fourth option visible as well. Okay, and now I'll be asking you to pause. Now you can pause, read the question and try answering it in the comment section. Okay, so now let us begin. Let us begin with the election of the Vice President of India. Recently concluded, and at the same time a very surprising event that has happened. Now let us understand what exactly are the constitutional provisions which are related to the Vice President of India. We are going to understand how exactly the election takes place. We are going to understand the very mechanism of what kind of voting mechanism takes place here. So one set, one stop, and your all doubts are gone. Okay, so what we are going to do here is, first of all, let us try to understand what exactly has been the background. Okay, so the news is that we have got the 15th Vice President of India, and the new Vice President is C.P. Radhakrishnan sir. Okay, so we are going to first of all understand what happened which prompted this snap election. Then how does the election take place? And then subsequently, what are the constitutional provisions related to it? So let us start with the very first thing. What triggered the Vice Presidential elections? So this is the former Vice President of India. He basically resigned. Jagdeep Dhankar sir, he abruptly resigned after presiding over the very first day of the monsoon session of the Parliament. Now when we talk about the session of the Parliament, the Constitution of India says that the Parliament, which has got two of its houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, they need to meet every year at least twice. It means that whenever you're talking about a session, so session is basically when the Parliament conducts its work. Okay, that is making laws, asking the government what exactly has been the action taken on a lot of different things. Okay, finalizing the budget, approving the withdrawal of money. These are all the things that the Parliament has to do. So for you can say exercising all the powers, you would want to have more amount of sittings. So when you sit together, you deliberate, then you decide what exactly is the best decision to be taken for the country. So for this to happen, the Constitution states that there should be at least 2 sittings in a year, and these 2 sittings should not be having a time duration of greater than 6 months in between them. So at least every 6 months there should be one sitting of the Parliament, which is called session. Okay, so as of now we have got 3 different sessions of the Parliament. Okay, the first one is basically called the budget session. Okay, so the first one, if I talk about, is called the budget session. Okay, the second one that we have is the monsoon session, and the third one that we have is called the winter session. So when you talk about the budget session actually starts from February and goes on almost till May. Okay, when you talk about monsoon session, roughly between July to August, this is the monsoon session. And then subsequently when we talk about the winter session, it is December or January. तो अभी हुआ क्या है right now that we have actually completed the budget session. ठीक है, बजट सेशन से वी हैड रिकन्वीन्ड फॉर द मॉनसून सेशन. तो मॉनसून सेशन का भी पहला सेशन जो था, द फर्स्ट सिटिंग ऑफ द मॉनसून सेशन वाज द वन व्हिच वाज प्रिसाइडेड ओवर बाय द फॉर्मर वाइस प्रेसिडेंट, एंड देन सब्सिक्वेंटली ही रिजाइन्ड बाय द इवनिंग citing health concerns. So that is why, because of the resignation that was tendered by the Vice President of India at that particular time, the elections for the Vice President, the office of Vice President were called upon. Okay, so let us first of all understand why did this happen. So when we talk about the resignation of Jagdeep Dhankar sir, so when we talk about it, so he basically gave the resignation on the backdrop of poor health. Okay, so the Constitution of India basically allows the Vice President to resign from their office by writing to the President. So under Article 67, Okay, Vice President, I am writing VP, can write a resignation letter to the President. Okay, and subsequently upon acceptance of this particular resignation, the incumbent Vice President, the occupant of the office of the Vice President, ceases to be the Vice President. Now interestingly, when we talk about the Constitution of India, so the Constitution of India does provide for the Vice President to resign voluntarily, but at the same time there is an issue. Once the Vice President resigns, who exactly is going to carry forward the functions of the Vice President? That is something which has not been demarcated. Okay, so in order to understand that very properly, we need to first of all look into the background of this particular you can say aspect of resignation. Okay, so yes, you might be knowing some amount of idea that the Vice President of India is also the ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha, and once he has actually resigned, so the deputy chairperson of Rajya Sabha takes over the presiding officer's post of the Rajya Sabha. That is fine. Okay, that is the ex officio chairperson's job, and that is now succeeded by the deputy chairperson. But the point is that what about this office, which is called the Vice President of India? Okay, so this is something where the Constitution is silent about. Now the next thing, when you talk about Sir Jagdeep Dhankar, so he basically abruptly resigned, and the opposition basically suspected some foul play in this. But at the same time, it was also the opposition which in the winter session last year 2024, they brought in a motion to remove the Vice President from his office, that is the chairpersonship of the Rajya Sabha. Okay, so again under Article 67 there is a provision for removal. Okay, there is a provision for removal of the Vice President. So the opposition actually came up with a notice for this particular proceedings to be done. But the point is that in order for the removal proceedings to be accepted, a 14 days advance notice has to be given. Okay, 14 days advance notice has to be given. And this is to be given to the Vice President. But the point being that by the time the opposition came up with this particular notice, there was not sufficient time of 14 days left in that entire session. Okay, so that is why although the notice came up, but the notice lapsed after the session was adjourned. Okay, so that is something which we can see that there has been discord with respect to the presiding officer, that is Jagdeep Dhankar sir, with respect to his way of functioning in the Rajya Sabha. Now the point being, the flashpoint was that because of the opposition actually accused him of partisan behavior, that he conducts the proceedings in a partial manner. He does not allocate sufficient amount of time for the opposition member of parliaments to keep their words or opinions in front of the government. Okay, now that was something in the winter session. In this particular session, there was basically a misunderstanding between the government's instruction and the you can say the chairperson of Rajya Sabha, that is Jagdeep Dhankar sir. Okay, and this was regarding the acceptance or admission of a motion for removal of a High Court judge. Now that is again one of the most interesting topics, but that will be covering it in the coming days. Okay, so as of now, this is what is the concept. Okay, so resignation of Jagdeep Dhankar sir was accepted by the President of India, and subsequently he ceased to be the Vice President, and at the same time the chairperson of Rajya Sabha as well. Now any such time when this particular thing happens, okay, so there is another article that is called Article 68. Okay, so Article 68 basically tells us that once such a situation has happened, either the Vice President has resigned, the Vice President has been removed, or for that matter the Vice President has passed away during the office. So in all the three situations, the elections for the next Vice President has to be conducted as soon as possible. Okay, so that is basically what is given under Article 68 as well. So when we talk about the constitutional provisions with respect to the with respect to the Vice President, the four most important constitutional provisions are Article 63. So Article 63 of the Constitution first of all establishes the office of the Vice President of India. Okay, while Article 64 actually designates the Vice President of India as the ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. So when you get this particular term, ex officio, so ex officio basically means by the virtue of position. So because you are occupying a particular position, so you are supposed to be heading a particular thing. So with respect to Rajya Sabha, the ex officio chairperson basically means whoever is the occupant of the office of Vice President, they by default become the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. Okay. Now, how exactly the Vice President is to be elected? That is given under Article 66 of the Constitution. Okay, what exactly is the tenure of the Vice President of India? That is 5 years normally, but at the same time the provisions for resignation and removal are covered under Article 67. Okay, and subsequently in Article 68, once this particular resignation, removal or expiration of the term of 5 years has happened, how exactly the re-election has to be conducted, that is something which is given under Article 68. Okay, so we are going to cover all of them in detail, don't worry about it. These are the most important ones, so that is why I have given an eagle's eye view. Okay, now let us talk about the you can say the constitutional provisions. So first of all, 63, 64 and 65. So when you talk about Article 63, so this is establishment of the office or the position, office of Vice President. Okay, Article 64, this basically tells you that Vice President shall be the ex officio chairperson. Okay, ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Now the next one that we have is basically Article 65. So in Article 65, the Vice President has been given a very interesting power. Okay, under Article 65 what has happened, that it has been said that if there is a vacancy in the office of President, okay, when the President's office is vacant, okay, so this vacancy basically means three things: death, removal, resignation. Okay, if the President of India dies in the office, if the President of India is removed from the office through the provisions of the Constitution, or for that matter, the President resigns on their own accord. In all the three cases, the Vice President of India acts as the President. For at most 6 months. Okay, so it basically means that the Vice President of India is going to be acting as the President of India. Okay, for at most 6 months. So within these 6 months, a fresh election has to be conducted for the President of India. Okay, so what does this tell us? Article 65 tells us that there is going to be no by default succession of the Vice President to the office of the President upon such a situation. Okay, now when you talk about the President of the United States, okay, so when the President of the United States is unavailable, removed, or for that matter has resigned, the Vice President by default becomes the President. Okay, now this is the fundamental difference between the Vice President's office in the United States and the Vice President's office in India. In India, there is no provision that upon the death, removal or resignation of the President, there will be in any ways the direct succession of the Vice President of India to the post of President. Okay, now the second thing, Article 65 also states if there is absence of the President. Okay, when there will be absence of the President, that means that the President is either on a foreign tour or for that matter is of ill health and is unable to discharge the functions of president, at that particular time again the vice president acts as the president. But now there is no time limit. Okay, as long as the president is absent, so long there will be this particular situation that the vice president will act as the president. Okay, and under article 65 it has also been said that as long as this is going to be the scenario, that there is going to be article, you can say as long as there is going to be scenario that president or vice president is acting as the president, they will not be discharging their function as the chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Okay, so this is something which is very important for us to understand. Okay, now let us talk about another very important aspect, article 66. Now when we talk about article 66 of the constitution, it talks about two things. Okay, first of all it talks about the election to the office. Second, it talks about electoral college. Third, it talks about eligibility. Okay, so when I talk about the election to the office, so this is basically done through proportional representation. Through single transferable vote. Okay, we'll be learning about that. When you talk about electoral college, with respect to the electoral college, it has been said that the electoral college is basically going to be the group of electors who actually participate in the election of the Vice President of India. Okay, so these are basically the group of electors who participate in the election. Okay, so with respect to election, I mean the Vice President of India. So when we talk about it, so this electoral college is basically comprising all members of parliament, I am writing them as MPs, of both the houses. Okay, both the houses, that is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Okay, so it basically means elected members as well as nominated members, both of them are going to be present here. Okay, that is the electoral college, all of them are going to participate. Okay, and the voting is going to take place through proportional representation through single transferable vote. Okay, now when you talk about the eligibility conditions, so when we talk about the eligibility conditions, so with respect to the eligibility conditions, the first condition is that any person to become the Vice President of India must be a citizen of India. Okay, at the same time at least 35 years old. Okay, and at the same time eligible to become member of Rajya Sabha. Okay, so this is basically the minimal qualification that you have with respect to becoming the Vice President of India. At the same time, there is also a criteria that he or she should not be holding any office of profit. Any office of profit. Basically, it means that any office that actually is either appointed to, okay, at any office or any position that is actually appointed by the government, whose salary is paid by the government, whose conditions of services are something which are determined by the government. Now that government could be the central government or the union government, that could be the state government, or for that matter the local government or the municipality. Okay, so should not be holding any office of profit under any government. Okay, so that could be union, state or local. Okay, this is the eligibility, that you should not be holding any such office. Why? Because if you are basically holding any such office, then you are going to be susceptible to, you can say, act in a partial manner towards the government. And at the same time there is an exception as well to this. Okay, so the exceptions to the office of profit. So the exceptions are, if the person is already the president, okay, or vice president or minister of center or state, or the person is a governor. Okay, in only these 4 offices are the ones which are exempt from the definition of office of profit. Apart from that, all the others basically have to resign from that particular office if they enter upon the office. At the same time, one of the other conditions that is there with respect to the eligibility is that she or he should not be a member of parliament or member of legislative assembly. Okay, if you basically are serving as a member of parliament or as a member of legislative assembly of any of the states or union territories of India, so once you are elected as the vice president, you have to vacate this position. It is deemed that you have left this position. Okay, so you should not be a member of the parliament or a legislative assembly of any states or the union territories. Okay, so this is basically all that is there with respect to the you can say Article 66 of the Constitution, that basically talks about the you can say the eligibility criteria for becoming the you can say vice president. Okay, now talking about the role of Election Commission. So the role of Election Commission of India in itself is a constitutional body. Okay, it basically means that this particular body has been established because of the provisions of the Constitution. Okay, तो इस बॉडी के बारे में आपके कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में आपके आर्टिकल्स हैं, एंड दैट इज व्हाई ये बॉडी हमेशा एग्जिस्ट करेगी. दिस बॉडी हैज टू एग्जिस्ट. Okay, now when we talk about the Election Commission of India, one of their primary mandate, okay, their primary mandate is to direct, supervise and conduct elections. क्योंकि election commission है, so it will basically be talking about elections. But to what? To parliament, state legislature or state legislative assembly, president and vice president. Okay, so these elections, either you become a member of parliament or you become a member of legislative assembly, MLA, or the elections to the office of president and vice president, they are all basically conducted by the Election Commission of India. So Election Commission of India in this particular regard is the body that is going to conduct the elections, and it is going to count the you can say votes and subsequently declare the results. ठीक है, तो इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया को सबसे पहले क्या करना पड़ेगा? इफ यू बेसिकली हैव टू कंडक्ट एन इलेक्शन, द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट यू हैव टू डू इज बेसिकली टू डिक्लेयर इलेक्शन डेट. Okay, so you have to declare the election date. So this particular election date with respect to the current vice presidential elections was actually given to be September 9th. Okay, so September 9th, 2025 was the date on which the vice presidential election took place, and on the same date the counting of the votes also took place. Okay, so this is the function of the election commission, that you have to direct, supervise and conduct. So you're conducting the elections. Okay, you're also issuing instructions how exactly the elections has to be conducted. You are verifying who are going to be the voters, and you're also counting the number of votes. Okay, so that is the role of election commission. Now, when we talk about the candidates who were actually fielded by the opposition as well as the government. So from the government side, we had Dr. C.P. Radhakrishnan. Miss C.P. Radhakrishnan sir. Okay. So C.P. Radhakrishnan sir. Okay. His last posting when he basically was given the nomination, he was actually serving as the governor of Maharashtra. Governor of Maharashtra. Okay, and the opposition side, so this is basically from the government side. Okay, from the opposition side, this is the opposition's candidate. Okay, so this was retired Supreme Court Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy. Okay, so these were the two candidates who were fielded by the government as well as the opposition with respect to this particular election. Okay, now moving to the next part, the nomination of the candidates. Now whenever the election have to take place, with respect to the Constitution of India, it only tells us how the election has to take place, कि भाई election का procedure क्या होगा. तो वो प्रोसीजर आर्टिकल 66 में क्या दिया हुआ है, proportional representation through single transferable vote. That is the mechanism that has been given to the by the constitution. But the way in which the nomination has to be done, the way in which the candidates have to be you can say registering their nomination, now that is something which is governed by the presidential and vice presidential Elections Act 1952. So this particular act actually lays down the procedure how exactly the candidates have to be nominated, what exactly are the bare minimum qualifications, and what exactly are going to be the other conditions that are required. Okay, so now we have seen who were the nominated candidates. Okay, but for these nominated candidates to be considered as the candidates for you can say vice presidential election, they have to file their nomination. Okay, so they have to file their nomination to a returning officer. Okay, now who exactly is a returning officer? So returning officer is basically any officer who is responsible for the overall conduct of a particular election. Okay, now this election could be conducted at the level of a booth in your place. This could be the election that is conducted at the level of your legislative assembly if you have an upper house, or for that matter with respect to the parliament. Okay, so the returning officer actually is the officer who is responsible for conducting the election. So when you talk about this particular aspect, okay, so the returning officer, this particular for the elections of president and vice president, is either Secretary General of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha in rotation. So for presidential and vice presidential elections, these two are the only officials who are designated as the returning officers. Okay, so for this particular time, in this particular elections, it was actually the Secretary General of Rajya Sabha who was the returning officer. So this particular individual was the one who was supposed to be receiving the nominations and subsequently scrutinizing them and then accepting them as the candidates for the elections. Okay, so the first step is that you have to file the nomination with the returning officer. But while you file them, okay, the nomination has to be supported. Nomination has to be supported. Okay, you should be showing, or you should be able to gather support by 20 proposers, 20 member of parliaments who are proposing the name, and 20 seconders who support this particular proposal. Okay, and both of these groups have to be only member of parliament, either belonging to Lok Sabha or to Rajya Sabha, but they have to be member of parliament with respect to the vice presidential elections. Okay, so 20 proposers and 20 seconders. Now why am I saying this? Because this is how the nomination scenario looks like. The candidate who is filing the nomination papers, and these are the proposers. Okay, these are the proposers. You can see the Prime Minister of India, you can see the Defence Minister of India, you can see the Home Minister of India, you can talk about Nitin Gadkari sir, the Minister of Road Transport and Highway. So this is basically the proposers, and all the ones who are sitting on the background, they are basically the seconders. They all support the candidature of C.P. Radhakrishnan sir. Okay, and this particular gentleman is actually the Secretary General. Secretary General of Rajya Sabha. Okay, so for this particular election, he is the returning officer. Okay, so this is the government's candidate. They have come to file the nomination. Now, this is the opposition's candidate, Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy, and you can find the opposition leaders here, and this is the returning officer again. So you can find Rahul Gandhi, you can find Mallikarjun Kharge, you can find Sonia Gandhi ma'am, you can find Sharad Pawar. Okay, so these are the proposers. Okay, and they are surrounded by the seconders. So this is basically how the nominations are received, and once the nominations are received, now it is the job of the returning officer to scrutinize the candidature, and at the same time, if any of the candidates believe that they should not be going ahead with the elections, so they are going to rescind their candidature by talking to the returning officer. तो अगर आपको अपने कैंडिडेचर को वापस लेना है इलेक्शन से, तो यू आर गोइंग टू टॉक टू द रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर. ओके, तो ये हो गया नॉमिनेशन. Now, this is the most interesting part, the election. Okay, so this is something which is actually called the ballot box. Okay, this is the ballot box. So it basically means that when the election of Vice President of India, or for that matter the President of India, is done, it is not done by the electronic voting machine. It is done via ballot paper. Okay, so this particular ballot box is the one where the ballot paper is put up. Okay, so ballot papers are dropped. Okay, so each individual member of parliament is going to come and drop their choice here. Okay, so this is basically the election's first step. So what is going to happen in this particular regard is that when you talk about this particular electoral college, I just told you that they basically are all the member of parliament, belonging to Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Okay, this is what we have understood. Now the next thing, okay, the mechanism for voting is basically, when I talk about the mechanism, so it is proportional representation through single transferable vote. So I am writing STV for single transferable vote, and this is to be done via secret ballot. Okay, So when this particular term is added, that the vote that is being put up is going to be done via secret ballot, it means that every single individual who is going to vote in this election is not under any obligation that they have to show their vote according to the party. They can vote any candidate they want and they will not be having any kind of repercussions in the form of defection. इसके बोलने का मतलब कि भाई जब आप बात करते हो सीक्रेट बैलेट का क्या मतलब है, तो जिसको मर्जी है, जिसका आपकी चॉइस है कि भाई ये पर्टिकुलर इंडिविजुअल जो है वो इलेक्ट होना चाहिए, आप उनको वोट कर सकते हो विदाउट द डेंजर कि आपको डिफेक्शन के तहत जो है आप यहाँ पे डिफेक्शन में प्रोसीड करोगे. ठीक है. सो दैट इज व्हाट द मीनिंग ऑफ सीक्रेट बैलेट इज, दैट who exactly is voting for whom is not going to be revealed to anyone. ठीक है. The next thing that we have to understand with respect to the electoral college is the vote value of all the MPs is the same. Okay, so all the value of the votes of the MPs is same. Every MP has got one vote and that has got equal weightage. Okay, why am I saying this? Because when we talk about the presidential elections, there is a difference with respect to the vote value of MLAs and MPs. अब वहां पे आपका इलेक्टोरल कॉलेज में MLA भी आते हैं, इस वजह से वोट वैल्यू का अंतर आता है. ठीक है. बट विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू द इलेक्शंस टू द वाइस प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया, वोट वैल्यू रिमेन्स द सेम. ओके. नाउ voting mechanism. So this basically means that there is going to be a single transferable vote. Okay. Now how exactly this particular thing happens? So first of all, single transferable vote basically means the first step is that you fill up the preferences on the ballot paper. I'll just show you a sample ballot paper as well. Okay. So in the sample ballot paper, you basically have got the name of the candidates who are running for the election. Now it is for the voter to decide who is their first preference, second preference and nth preference, depending upon if they would want to give a second or third preference or not. But what is mandatory, you have to give the first preference. Okay, so that's the first thing, you have to fill up the preferences in the ballot paper. The second thing, okay, the preferences are filled up only in international numerals. Okay, so just like we write 1, 2, 3, 4, only in that particular way you can fill up this particular preference. Okay, then put the ballot paper in the ballot box. So it is expected that you basically are going to give at least one preference. At least your first preference is something that you should be mentioning. But sometimes what does happen, that the members of parliament, they deliberately do not give a first preference, or for that matter they do not fill any preference at all and they submit such votes in the ballot box. Okay, so subsequently all these votes become invalidated. I'll show you that as well. Okay. So this is basically how a ballot paper would look like. Okay, so don't go with the candidate's name here, it is just a sample. So what basically has been given, you have to put the preference, who exactly is your first preference, second preference, third preference and so on. Okay, so depending upon that, what is going to happen, that there may be a case that the elector actually fills 3 preferences, all the 3 preferences they have filled up. Okay, there could also be the case that the preference is like this. Okay, or for that matter there could also be the case where you have actually said this as your preference, or for that matter you could leave all of them completely blank. So these are the 3 cases. You could file your preferences. Okay, आपने अपने preferences भरे in the right way. You could fill any of those but not all of them, or for that matter you either fill 2 of the same preferences or you leave it completely blank. So this is something which is going to become invalidated. It will become invalid because you have given 2 first preferences. That cannot happen. Or for that matter, if you could have given 2 second preferences, 2 third preferences or any other you can say creativity, they are going to be invalid. The first thing. Now what happens? Now basically it is something which is very, very important, that the counting actually begins with the first preference votes. Okay, so with respect to India, the first preference votes are the ones which are counted first. I'll just tell you the mechanism as well. And this is basically how a spoiled ballot paper or a cancelled ballot paper would look like. That you basically have done overwriting, you have given the same preference to a lot of people, or for that matter you have filled the same preference on both sides. So this is going to be the way in which it is going to be a cancelled or invalidated ballot paper. Now when it comes to the point of counting votes, okay, so when we talk about the counting of the votes, the mechanism is a little complex. Okay, so in the counting of votes, what is going to happen? First of all the first preference votes are counted. Okay, all first preference votes are counted. Now with respect to the current election, the election that has just happened, okay, there were 752 valid votes. Okay, these were the total number of valid votes that were counted for this election. There were 15 votes which were actually invalidated, and there were certain vacancies. Now what will be done? These 752 votes, all these 752 votes, first preference is going to be counted. Okay, now the next thing, you are going to find out the quota. Okay, so quota is basically the threshold that you need to actually achieve. Okay, this is the threshold for election. You need to secure at least these amounts of votes so that you can actually be elected. Okay, so this quota is basically 752 divided by 2, whatever is going to be the answer, okay, plus 1 to that. So when you divide 752 by 2, the answer that you are going to get as the quotient is 376. This is going to be the quotient. Okay, and then subsequently you will add 1 to it. So that becomes 377. Now this 377 is basically the minimum number of votes that any candidate, okay, needs to secure in order to become the Vice President of India. Now the point being that if any candidate secures all of these votes in the very first preference itself, so that candidate is elected. Now let us say that while the counting is taking place, in the first preference votes that have been counted, none of the candidate could cross this particular threshold. So in this particular regard, what is going to happen? Now what is going to be happening, that this particular you can say threshold is not crossed. So now all those who have received the least amount of votes are going to be first of all eliminated. Okay, and now the first preference vote of all those who have been eliminated are going to be transferred to the subsequent next preferences. So let us say someone actually in this particular case, let us say that Devi is here. Okay, so Devi is here basically has the least amount of votes. Okay, so all those individuals who have given the first preference as Devis, now their second preference votes are basically the ones which are going to be transferred to all of these candidates. Okay, and then subsequently what is going to be seen, if this quota has been achieved. If it has been achieved, again the result is going to be an election. If not, then the next person who has got the least number of votes is actually taken up. Let us say in this particular case it is Evans. Okay, so first of all Davis gets eliminated because Davis has actually secured the least number of votes. Now Evans is basically the one whose higher preference is going to be seen, and then it will be transferred. So what is happening, the preference of the votes are then transferred to the next higher preference, and subsequently this particular figure is achieved. Okay, so in single transferable vote system, it is always ensured that there is a certain minimum number of votes which are going to be more than 50% of the total number of valid votes that need to be secured. तो इसी वजह से जब तक ये 377 वोट्स आपको नहीं मिलेंगे, अब वो फर्स्ट प्रेफरेंस वोट्स हों, सेकंड प्रेफरेंस, थर्ड प्रेफरेंस मिला के हों, तब तक आप इस चीज को इलेक्शन को कंक्लूड नहीं करोगे. ठीक है, सो दैट इज बेसिकली द केस दैट हियर वी एंश्योर दैट देयर इज अ complete majority of the person who wins. Okay, because the valid number of votes divided by 2 plus 1. Okay, so this is basically how the counting in the election takes place, and this is basically how you see that the ballot boxes are the one where the parliamentarians are casting their vote. You can see the Prime Minister of India, you can see Sonia Gandhi ma'am, you can see Nitin Gadkari sir. So what you're seeing in the background, there is no particular individual who is peeping into their ballot paper. For that matter, they are also not showing their ballot paper to anyone. ठीक है, तो ना इनके बैलेट पेपर में कोई झांक रहा है और ना ये अपने बैलेट पेपर को किसी को दिखा रहे हैं. सो दिस इज बेसिकली व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज सीक्रेट बैलेट. ठीक है, सो नो वन इज गोइंग टू रिकॉग्नाइज हु एग्जैक्टली हैज वोटेड फॉर हुम. और जब तक आपको ये पता चलेगा ही नहीं तो फिर डिफेक्शन का कोई केस ही नहीं बनता. डिफेक्शन बेसिकली तब होता है व्हेन यू आर एक्चुअली वोटिंग अगेंस्ट व्हाट हैज बीन इंस्ट्रक्टेड बाय योर पार्टी. लेट अस से योर पार्टी सेड यू हैव टू वोट इन फेवर ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर थिंग, you voted in against, that is considered defection. लेकिन वो तब होता है जब आपका वोट दिखता हो, when your vote is known that you have been asked to do this, you have done that. When your vote is unknown, where exactly you have voted, no one is going to have you having any kind of defection. So that is the thing. Okay, I hope this is something which is clear. Now the point being that after this was done, okay, so the total number of electoral, you can say the electors who were actually there with respect to the strength of both the houses. So there are 543 member of parliaments in Lok Sabha and 245 member of parliaments in Rajya Sabha. So 543 plus 245, they basically give a total of 788. Out of these 788, there have been 5 vacancies. Okay, there have been 5 vacancies in Rajya Sabha and 1 vacancy in Lok Sabha. Basically it means that these seats are vacant either due to death, disqualification, resignation of the member of parliament. Okay, so these are the ones who have been vacant. So the current strength is actually 781. Out of these 781, there were 767 individuals who participated in the elections. So 767 members of parliament actually participated in the vice presidential elections, out of which 15 votes were deemed to be invalid. Okay, so the number of valid votes became 752, and after that, from these 752 valid votes, 452 votes were actually in the favor of C.P. Radhakrishnan and 300 votes were actually in the favor of Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy. So subsequently, Justice B. Sudarshan Reddy actually was the one who lost the elections to C.P. Radhakrishnan sir. Okay, now talking about the term of office of the Vice President. So when we talk about the term of office of the Vice President, so the term is for 5 years. Okay, so the term is 5 years from the date of entering the office. This is something which is very, very important, especially in the current scenario. Okay, why? Because when you talk about the term of office with respect to the Vice President, so right now we have seen that the Vice President has resigned midway through his tenure. ठीक है, तो हमारे पुराने वाइस प्रेसिडेंट जो थे वो अपने 5 साल के टेन्योर को खत्म करने से पहले ही रिजाइन कर गए. So what about the new vice president who has been elected? This new vice president will have a complete 5 years tenure. Okay, from the date he assumes the office. That's the first thing. Okay, now within these 5 years, the vice president may resign by writing to the president. Okay, the next thing that we have understood apart from this, that there could be removal of vice president. Now very, very carefully understand this. When you talk about the removal of the vice president, okay, this is basically done by a resolution of Rajya Sabha. Okay, having a majority of the then member of parliaments. I am going to explain this as well. Okay, plus agreed to by the Lok Sabha. Okay, and this removal is done after serving a 14 days advance notice. to the vice president. Okay. So in this particular regard, what do we understand? We understand that the term of office of the vice president is something which is also subject to removal. तो ये जो removal है ये कैसे होगा? When Rajya Sabha basically comes up with a resolution. Why? Because Vice President of India serves as the chairperson of Rajya Sabha. So the first you can say right of removal is for the Rajya Sabha. So Rajya Sabha basically comes up with a resolution and that has to be passed with the majority of the then members of Rajya Sabha. तो देखो Rajya Sabha में 245 members is the total strength. Okay. Out of these 245 members, as of now there are 6 vacancies in Rajya Sabha. So if there are 6 vacancies in Rajya Sabha, so the total number of present members of parliament is 239. 245 minus 6. So these 239, out of these 239, when you divide it by 2 and then add 1, that should be the number of member of parliaments who should actually support this notion that the vice president be removed. Then that resolution is sent to the Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha, if it passes by a majority, that is more than 50% plus one of the members present and voting, at that particular time, this particular removal process is the one which is going to be you can say completed, and then subsequently with the resolution sent to the President of India, the removal is complete. Okay, तो ये आपकी दूसरी चीज है, how exactly the removal takes place. Okay, so this is also something which is given in the you can say term of office. So these are the 3 things that we actually see: normal term, resignation, and then subsequently removal. Okay, and beyond that, when we talk about Article 68, so in Article 68 it has been said that before the current occupant of the office completes their full term of 5 years, so 60 days before the completion or full expiration, it has to be ensured that the elections have been concluded, that fresh elections have taken place within the last 2 months of the full term of the incumbent. Okay, तो अभी जो भी आपकी वाइस प्रेसिडेंट की कुर्सी पे हैं, उनके पूरे 5 साल खत्म होने के 2 महीने पहले आपको ये इलेक्शन कंप्लीट करना है. And why exactly is this done? So that the day when the incumbent vice president vacates the office, the new vice president can take over the office. ठीक है? So that is the thing, that fresh elections have to be done within 60 days of expiration of the terms. Okay, that's the first thing that we have to understand very, very clearly. And then the second thing, the vice president will continue to hold the office so long the successor has not been elected. Okay, so as long as the successor has not assumed the office, the vice president, the current vice president, is going to continue. Okay, so that basically means that the term of the current vice president may extend beyond 5 years if in any case the elections could not be conducted. Okay, so this is something that we need to understand very, very clearly, and this is where you find UPSC asking questions. Okay, now oath and affirmation. The person who becomes the vice president of India has to subscribe an oath. Okay, now the oath is administered by the President of India. Administered by the President of India, and it is the vice president who has to take this particular oath. Okay, that is under Article 69 of the Constitution of India. Okay, so subsequently this is the oath taking ceremony that actually happened on September 12th, and subsequently the vice president of India has now assumed office. So that is the President of India, Madam Draupadi Murmu. She is administering the oath of office to CP Radhakrishnan sir for you can say the vice president's office. Now this particular article, Article 70, is basically about contingencies. All the things that have been already mentioned under Article 65, that in case of vacancy in the office of the president. Okay, so whatever are the situations that have been mentioned there, that is absence or for that matter casual vacancy, the vice president has to act. But the point is, if at all any of such situations have been missed out and some new situation emerges in the future, so Article 70 actually empowers the Parliament to attach such duties to the Vice President. Okay, so this is basically for the Parliament to attach any other duty to the Vice President upon casual vacancy situations not covered under Article 65. Okay. So that is something that we need to understand. So this is a contingency that sometimes it does happen that not all the situations can be foretold. You cannot imagine all the situations that are going to happen in the future, and subsequently you have such contingencies in place so that you are never left without any kind of you can say guiding lamp. And this is exactly where the Constitution of India shines. The Constitution of India has been a robust document because it has actually had some kind of contingency or mitigation always in place whenever we have been in any kind of you can say confusion. Okay, so this is basically an example of that thing. So whatever the Constituent Assembly could not imagine, that could be actually taken up by the Parliament. Okay, so now election disputes. Now this is very natural that there could be sometimes the situations where there could be an electoral dispute with respect to the elections to the office of President and Vice President. So these election disputes are heard by a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court. Okay, this is the only place where you can be talking about any kind of electoral disputes of either President or Vice President. Okay, it is only and only the Supreme Court, and within the Supreme Court a 5-judge bench is something which is going to be hearing this particular petition. Okay, now at the same time the decisions of Supreme Court are going to be final. Okay, the decision of the court are going to be final. And then the third thing that we need to understand is that this particular decision, if the court invalidates, okay, if the election is invalidated for any reason, okay, so all the acts that have been done either by the President of India or by the Vice President of India before this decision, they will not be invalidated, they will remain in force. Okay, if the election is invalidated, all the acts done previously in the exercise of power will remain in force. They will not be negated. Okay, so that is something which is very, very important for us to understand. Okay, now interestingly, what the Constitution of India does not tell us is that while there is a provision for removal of the Vice President of India, okay, but there have been no grounds on what grounds can this removal procedure be initiated. Okay, this is a very, very interesting thing, that there are no grounds that have been mentioned in the Constitution of India which actually are going to be you can say the grounds on which the removal process can be initiated. Okay, now this is something which has been a distinction. With respect to the President of India, there are grounds of removal. With respect to the removal of the Supreme Court or High Court judges, there are grounds of removal. But for Vice President of India, there are no grounds of removal that are mentioned in the Constitution of India. Now another interesting thing is the salaries and allowance. So when you talk about the Vice President of India, the Constitution does not prescribe any salary. Okay, Constitution does not prescribe any salary for Vice President. Okay, so Vice President draws the salary fixed by the Parliament as the chairperson of Rajya Sabha. okay, as the chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Now this is also a very important thing for us to understand. Okay, and at the same time the salary of the chairperson of Rajya Sabha is a charged expenditure on the consolidated fund of India, charged upon consolidated fund of India. As of now, imagine consolidated fund of India as a piggy bank, okay, from where you are going to withdraw money for the running of the government. Charged expenditure basically means that just imagine that you are actually paying rent of your house. It doesn't matter that you remain in this particular house throughout the month, or for that matter you remain here for a few days or a few hours. You have to pay the rent in full. Okay, so that is something that has to be done. You cannot be having any kind of two thoughts about it. So charged expenditures are like that. They are fixed costs. They have to be given. Okay, and what is to be given is to be decided by the parliament. So vice president has got zero salary, but vice president as the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha draws this particular salary. Okay, so this is basically the vice president of India. Now when you talk about the powers and functions, so as the chairperson of Rajya Sabha, so he is the presiding officer of Rajya Sabha, and as the presiding officer or the chairperson of Rajya Sabha, what exactly is the condition here? So the vice president of India as the chairperson of Rajya Sabha conducts the business of Rajya Sabha. Okay, so all the business that has to be done, that will be conducted and regulated, okay, by the chairperson. Then at the same time the power of adjourning a sitting, adjournment of a sitting, that will be done by the presiding officer. Okay, then at the same time they will be having a casting vote in case of a tie. Only in such a situation will there be a vote of the presiding officer. So it means that if a particular proposal is under consideration and both the sides, favor as well as against, have cast equal number of votes, so at that particular time is the only situation when the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha actually votes, and such a vote is called casting vote. Okay, and at the same time also the authority to consider disqualification under the anti-defection law or 10th schedule. Okay, under 10th schedule, also called anti-defection. So this is basically the power of the vice president. All the power that are actually related to the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha is vested in this particular office. Okay, apart from that, the Constitution of India does not mention any other function that has been assigned to the office of the Vice President of India. Okay, all the functions are actually through the chairpersonship of the Rajya Sabha itself. So I hope this is something which is extremely clear to you, what exactly is the office of Rajya Sabha and subsequently what exactly are the you can say constitutional provisions related to it. Now when you talk about C.P. Radhakrishnan, so C.P. Radhakrishnan basically has been initially a garment exporter. Okay, then at the same time he has been a long time functionary of the BJP. So he has been a 2 times Lok Sabha MP. Okay, he is a 2 times Lok Sabha MP from Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. Okay, then at the same time when you talk about this particular you can say scenario, so he has also served as the chief of the BJP state unit of Tamil Nadu. At the same time he has also been a part of the parliamentary delegation to Taiwan. At the same time delegation to Taiwan. Okay, he has also served as the chairperson of Coir Board. Okay, and he has also served as the governor. He has served as the governor of Jharkhand. Okay, additional charge of Telangana and Puducherry. and then finally he was the governor of Maharashtra before becoming the vice president of India. Okay, so this is 2024, this is 2023, and this is March 2024. Okay, so this is about CP Radhakrishnan. He has been a public figure for a long period of time now. Now let us talk about this particular question very quickly. Consider the following statements about the Vice President of India. The Vice President of India is directly elected. The Chief Justice of India administers the oath of office to the Vice President of India. Which of the statements given above is or are correct? So, Vice President of India is not directly elected. With respect to direct elections, it means that the people of India actually elect the Vice President, but that is not the case. The Vice President is elected by the members of Parliament only. So that is why the vice presidential elections are indirect in nature. Okay. Now the oath for the office of the vice president is actually administered by the President of India, not the Chief Justice of India. It is the President of India under Article 69 who administers this particular oath. So the correct answer to this particular question is that both of the statements are wrong. So the correct answer would be option D, neither 1 nor 2. Okay. Now, test your knowledge. The second question, consider the following statements about the Vice President of India. The Vice President automatically succeeds the office of the President in case of removal, resignation or death of the President. Statement 2. Article 65 of the Constitution provides for the Vice President to act as the President in case of a casual vacancy or during the absence of the President. Okay, so these questions have been a new kind of questions that have come back in 2023 with respect to UPSC. So what these questions actually try to evaluate, first thing you have to evaluate if both these statements are correct or incorrect. Which one of them is factually or conceptually incorrect, or if both of them are correct, is the second statement the correct reason for the first statement. Okay, so the options here are statement 1 and 2 are correct and statement 2 correctly explains statement 1. That is the first option. Okay. The second option is statement 1 and 2 are correct, but statement 2 is not the correct explanation for statement 1. That is the second option. Okay. The third option is statement 1 is correct while 2 is incorrect, and statement 4 is that statement 1 is incorrect and statement 2 is correct. So you have to understand these options very properly, and now when you are actually reading for UPSC, my recommendation that you have to explore such concepts when you are reading the questions. Okay, when you are reading your text, you have to search for these clues as well. If there is something, why exactly is that happening? So in this particular question, the Vice President automatically succeeds the office of the President in case of removal, resignation or death of the President. So if you have been paying attention, this has been very clear that this is the wrong statement here. There is no provision that the Vice President is going to automatically succeed. Okay, the Vice President may act as the President for at most 6 months. That is what is given under Article 65. Now, Article 65 of the Constitution provides for the Vice President to act as the President in case of casual vacancy or during the absence of the President. This is correct, absolutely correct. So the correct option would be statement 1 is incorrect and statement 2 is correct. Option D. Okay, that's the correct answer here. So this is all with respect to the election of the Vice President of India. So I hope this is something which has been clear with you and you could understand what exactly the entire exercise of the election to the office of Vice President entails and all the constitutional provisions that are related to it. So if you have any doubt, please do comment. Okay, do comment, and if you like this, so please also share this with your friends so that they can also comprehensively solve all their doubts together.